Thanks for listening to the Lunch and Learn with Dr. Barry, here to help educate, motivate, and put you on the right path to take control of your health through weekly discussions on topics in the medical field, public health arena, and in your community. And now your host, Dr. Barry.
What's up, everybody? Dr. Barry here, your host of the Lunch and Learn, bringing you episode 67. And today we're going to be talking about some very recent events on the news with a Dr. Wendell Davis Boot. I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing that last name correctly, but I think it's Boot, right? Some people have been saying it's like Boutte. I don't think it's Boutte, but I've actually haven't heard it, actually said out loud. I just keep seeing videos of, what she's doing, right? So we're going to be talking about if you know what your doctor is actually doing for a living, right? Because I think this case brings a lot of questions out to light that I think from a patient perspective, right? I think from a patient perspective, most of you guys don't really know what your doctor does, right? You know maybe what type of field he's in, right? But you don't necessarily, he or she, but you don't necessarily know what they actually do, right? In totality, right? And so we'll get into the breakdown of how this dermatologist / cosmetic surgeon is in trouble, some things that she could have did to possibly avoid being in trouble, and kind of just what's the outlook for other physicians, right? Because a case like this, where you have social media being used in a very negative way towards a physician using social media, I'm very weary of, right? Because obviously, if you're listening to me and you've been, rocking with me since, Dr. Pierre's blog, you know I use social media quite frequently, and it's a avenue that I almost require, right? Like I almost tell my pre-meds and my medical students, like, you should have to be on it, right? Like, especially in this day and age. So we're going to talk about this case. We're going to be talking about, the do's and don'ts. We're going to be asking you guys, do you actually know what your doctor does for a living, to make sure you don't run into any similar problems or issues or concerns in the future. Thank you for listening to the Lunch and Learn. If you want today's show notes, head over to drpiersblog.com/LLP067, and remember to empower yourself for better health. All right, so we're here today, right? Because very recent events in the news with a Dr. Wendell Davis Boot and malpractice shoot she's going through that is shedding some unfortunate light on some of the incorrect ways to use social media, if I may add, right? And before I start, right, I know a couple of people are going to mention people like Pimple Popper, people like Dr. Miami, Dr. Kirby, the dermatologist out of California. I know you guys are gonna mention that, right? And so I want to first let's answer those questions right off the bat, right? I think as one who uses social media and who enjoys using social media and understands the power of social media, I think there is a right and wrong way, to promote yourself, right? And in this case, right, it's two separate things, right? We have a physician, right, fellow physician who's being sued for an unfortunate event that occurred during a cosmetic procedure, right? But I can tell you, being the person who's had to clear probably over 1,000 patients by now for surgery, that a lot of times those, any type of surgery, it doesn't really matter, right? They always list it, right? There's always risks and complications, right? There is no, benign surgery that's, zero risk, right? There isn't any. And it's the reason why, you should always, be very mindful when your family and friends are gonna have surgery, right? Because it's not 100% guaranteed, right, that it's gonna go 100% okay. That being said, right, I know these contracts, these clauses that you sign off, these consents that you tend to sign off, that a lot of people just sign and don't even necessarily read. You guys don't necessarily get into the nitty gritty of all of the problems that possibly could occur. But, an unfortunate event happened. A patient of hers had, some complications like a cardiac arrest or some issue that happened during one of her cosmetic surgeries. And she's being sued for that, right? So that's one part. Now, the other part is that she happened to also post videos on her YouTube channel, right, and her website. Now, as we speak, right, depending on when you listen to this, right, as we speak, those are like already down, right? Like she's already taken them down. I guess from a legal law standpoint, she's already took them down. And the question asked is, why is she doing that? Like, why is she posting videos? Because that's the first thing I saw, right? Like, what do you mean? Why is she posting videos during surgery? Why is she doing this? And again, she may have consent, right? Some of without all of that, the papers that she signed for consent most likely will include some line like, "Hey, I'm allowed to post on social media," right? And that's something you sign off for beforehand, right? So I don't think that's the issue, right? I know a lot of people are attending, especially media wise, are trying to tie it into that sense to make it like it's one of the same. Like the reason why she's being sued is because she was shooting a YouTube video at the same time she should have been, doing surgery, and that caused a complication. That's not the case here, at least from everything I've read. It's more of a matter of, how do we as physicians and how do you as a patient, right, properly use social media to our advantage, and, for the patient's sake, not be concerned about, what your physician does, right? Because, and I said in the intro, she's a dermatologist, right, who specializes in cosmetic surgery. And immediately, a lot of the comments that I saw, not only from like general patients, right, but even like other physicians, right, who clearly aren't up to date on, what their colleagues do, right? So again, even though I said, this title of this show is, do you know what your physician does, right? Like, I'm not just talking to the patient, right? I'm talking to other physicians as well, because I thought it was pretty funny that there are a lot more physicians out here who are just as shocked that a dermatologist does cosmetic surgery than anybody. And I was like, oh, well, it is just a procedure, right? And for those from a background standpoint, in medicine, right, we go to medical school, right? We all, do what we need to do to get to medical school. We finish medical school. And then right afterwards, we choose which residency we're going to choose, whether it be internal medicine, family medicine, surgery, ophthalmology, whatever that happens to be, we all end up choosing one or the other. And what is occurring now in our system of medicine is that you almost become pigeonholed, right? Like if I choose internal medicine, right, it means that I'm telling the world, right, that I only want to deal with adult patients. I don't want to deal with patients from a women's health perspective. I don't want to deal with patients from an OB perspective. I don't want to deal with patients in the children perspective, right? That's essentially what you're telling the world when you specialize, right? Same thing if you're a subspecialist and you go into cardiology and gastroenterology and all these other subspecialties. You're essentially telling the world that I only want to focus on this and I don't want to focus on that. What we're not saying, right, and what is, I think, some underlying rule that for some reason has been kind of established is that just because I'm an internist doesn't mean I can't take care of kids. It just means I'm not specialized to do so. I'm not, quote unquote, board certified specialized to do so. So you have a lot of people, and again, that's patients, physicians, right, who are like, oh, how's this dermatologist doing surgery, right? Well, like, honestly, if you do enough surgical procedures, you can do surgery, right? Again, I'm an internist. I'm a hospitalist now. I did outpatient medicine. But if I do enough, endoscopy under training and under, if I get enough certified under my belt, guess what I can start doing? Endoscopies, right? So it's not necessarily that I had to go to a certain residency to do said procedure, right? Because I think that's where a lot of people were getting kind of tied up in, right? It's just that, after she finished her residency, I'm not sure where she did her residency at, but after she finished doing her residency, she did enough procedures to be qualified to do so. And then she's in the state of Georgia, which allows a little bit more flexibility in what physicians can do in the first place. So I definitely wanted to kind of get that, out there in the beginning to say that remember as a physician, right, and as a patient, right, yes, your doctor may be specialized in one field, but that doesn't necessarily, constrict him to or her to be able to do other things. Right, I have a great friend of mine, Dr. Duce Masaranis, and I apologize if I butchered her last name. But she goes by Lips by Dr. Duce. If you go on Instagram, Lips by Dr. Duce, I'll put a link in the show notes. Right, she's absolutely amazing, family medicine trained, but she is like that person, right? Like she is the one you need to go to, right? If you want your lips done, right? And other cosmetic things, right? Because that's what she did extra training for, right? Again, she didn't have to go to become a dermatologist just to be able to do that. She went through her family medicine residency, and then she did additional training to get that experience to do so. And now it's like, again, if you're in South Florida, right? Again, I think she's booked until like December or something. But if you're in South Florida, look up Lips by Dr. Duce. And if you get an appointment with her, try to get one because she's absolutely amazing. Her pictures are amazing. She's on Instagram. I'll show the links in the show notes. But that being said, right, again, I want, you as a patient, right, you as a patient understand that, just because your physician is, certified as one thing, that doesn't mean they have to do the other, right? And I think I was more disappointed in the physicians, right? I think I was more disappointed in physicians who were like 100% like, oh my God, this person's license should be taken away. This person's, career should be on hold because they're doing videos, right? Like, again, like they somehow, and it wasn't necessarily their fault, right? The media can do what the media does. I've talked about this before, how, the media is good at trying to, kill celebrities off, right? The media is great at kind of framing a story, and really it's two different stories, right? This happens to be a dermatologist who, has some malpractice suits going on because of some complication during surgery, right? As well as she happens to shoot videos for social media, right? Now, again, I will say as a physician who does social media, right, some of the things I probably would not have done if I was her, right, is in regards to I would give some more before and afters, right? Like, let the world know, right? Especially if we're going to do it online, right? Let the world know, like, hey, I'm about to pub and I'm about to, put you on video, and, at least that way the world can see, like, okay, this is from start to end, right? Patients, and I think people in general, are just weary anytime you're doing something in the OR room, right? It's definitely a scary experience. I talked about how, again, you are not guaranteed to leave that surgical suite, right? You are not guaranteed, right? Something can happen, right? Just like I tell patients in the hospital, right? You are not guaranteed to walk out of this hospital. So I'm always thankful when you do, because anything can happen where you come in for a cough and you don't leave, right? And I've seen that, unfortunately, more times than not in my career as a resident, and I was an attending physician. So I think those are two things I want to kind of make sure we kind of get clear in that regard, right? So from a commentary standpoint, especially from the social aspect of it, we have this physician who I will tell you had some mistakes, right? Had some issues in terms of how is she presenting herself on social media, right? Like I'm a fan of hip hop, right? Like I'm 100% with you rocking with hip hop, right? But I think you got to have that more patient encounter. You got to let the people know that the patients are just in line with what you do as anybody, right? I have my patients all the time, especially when I did outpatient medicine. They would always ask me, hey, when can I be on the next lunch and learn video, right? They always wanted to be on the next lunch and video because it was something that they knew me from, and they didn't feel bad jumping on it. Like, so it was something, the opportunity was always there to get patients to join me, right? So that was definitely something that I didn't open it for them because I was like, yeah, let me just do it for now, and later down the line I'll think about it. But it was an option, right? And I think because we're only seeing one side, right? We're only seeing her in the OR, and her with her staff, having fun, right? But you see this patient, and you're like, oh, this patient's unconscious. This patient can't know what's happening, right? When I'd be shocked, right, if the patient didn't know. Right? I'd be shocked if she didn't say, hey, I may put you on social media, right? I'd be shocked if someone didn't sign off on one of those consents that says I'm allowed to use you on social media, right? Especially, and again, just from an education standpoint, right? I heard a lot of people say, oh, this is a HIPAA violation, right? And if I'll put a link in the show notes to my post about the HIPAA monster, right? In medicine, right, we are extremely terrified of HIPAA violations. Why? Because HIPAA violations cost us some money. But one of the big things I always tell my residents, my medical students, right, if you can look at a picture, right, if you can look at a video and you can tell who that patient is from some type of identifying information, right, that's likely a HIPAA violation, right? If you can't do that, then it's not a HIPAA violation, regardless, right? So yes, you may be able to see this person's back, right? But unless you're a 100% back expert, and you've seen all the backs in the world, there's no way you're gonna know who that patient is that's lying on the table, right? So again, definitely not a HIPAA violation. That was some of the comments that I saw, coming just, from the comment section, right? And it's very interesting, especially stories like these. The comment section is always the best, right? Like, I always encourage, people, especially people who are on social media, right? Especially if you are not, let me say this, if you're not one who gets very easily dismayed by comments, right? The comment section is it's almost, sometimes almost comical, right? Because you can kind of see the spectrum of knowledge gaps that kind of, are running rampant in the college section and in the comment section, right? Because, again, you had people who are like, there's no way dermatologists should never be able to doing this. Like, you should be sued because she said she was a cosmetic surgeon. She's not really a quote unquote surgeon, even though, again, I know a lot of dermatologists who do a lot of surgery, right? Like, I think a lot of times people think of dermatology and they think of, acne and, rashes and stuff like that. But there's a lot of dermatologists out here who do a lot of additional work, especially from a surgical aspect, right? There's a lot of dermatology residencies who have built-in surgical rotations and certifications within their residency. A lot of my dermatology friends will, after dermatology, right? So after they finish their 3 years of dermatology, will then go to summer workshops to build up their acumen on doing certain procedures that they may not necessarily be familiar with, or they may not have had enough experience with as a resident, right? So again, that's one notion I want to make sure we get out the way quick. Like, a dermatologist can easily be a surgeon, right? Because they do a lot of skin grafts, and I know some dermatologists do lipos and biopsies, and like, that's the dermatologist. That's really the name of the game. So again, you see people say, "Oh, dermatology shouldn't be doing surgery," right? When that's like completely false, right? You see people saying that her license should be taken away. No, I don't think a license should be taken away because she does videos. Again, if she was found to be negligent, then you could start talking about taking a license away. But making a video, nah. Because again, like I said, I point right back to the pimple poppers of the world, who I think now has a TV show. Dr. Miami now has a TV show, and they're doing the same exact thing. In fact, if you don't know Pimple Popper, right? She's a dermatologist. Look at the procedures that she does, right? Like, so if the Dr. Pimple Popper is able to do a lot of the surgical procedures that she does, right, it's not going to seem as far-fetched as Dr. Davis Boot is doing, right, in Georgia, in that regards, right? So I think for sure one of the biggest fallouts that are likely is going to occur from a story like this, right, is all of a sudden a trust factor is going to occur, right? So all of a sudden, especially as you as the patient and you as a physician, right, the most common thing you have in their relationship is the ability to trust, right? You have to be able to trust that the doctor you're going to has your best interest at hand, right? You have to be able to trust that the doctor you're going to isn't going to put you on social media without your consent, right? You have to be able to trust that your doctor you're going to is competent enough to do whatever procedure they say they're competent enough to do, right? I think some people were saying, I guess she's declaring herself as, the best cosmetic surgeon or plastic surgeon in the United States or the world. Or I'm not sure what the actual phrase is because the website's down. But I'll be honest, I don't want to go to any surgeon, any dermatologist, any family medicine physician, any pediatrician, any ophthalmologist. I don't want to go to any one of those physicians, right, who don't think they are the best, right? Ask me where I rank in the world of program directors / hospitalists / home health. Like, ask me where I rank, and it's gonna be number 1, right? Because if I don't think I'm ranked number 1, right, like, how can I confidently take care of my patients, right? Like, again, an ego, right, is not something that should be compressed, right, or depressed in regards to as a physician, right? Because again, this is a life or death matter, right, for a lot of physicians, right? Again, I tell people all the time. I've said it on the podcast, right? Being a physician, right, is one of the toughest jobs because for most of us, it's life or death on every single day, right? I work as a hospitalist physician, right? I work in a hospital. I take care of patients who are acutely ill, right? Every decision I make from the second they walk in the door can affect whether they're going to walk out the door, right? And that's the stress you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Understanding that your mistake, right? Your mistake can and will hurt somebody, right? And hurt could, ultimately end in death, right? So that's not something, we take lightly, right? So I want to make sure my physician feels that they are the best person to be able to take care of it in the world, right? Like that's how every physician on this planet should be operating, right? Like again, if you're a critical care physician, you better be the best in the world, right? If you're a dermatologist, you better think you're the best in the world, right? If you're a surgeon, you better think you're the best in the world, right? Because this is life or death. So I got no problem with that, right? I just have an issue, right? Especially as a physician and one who does social media, is that now it may make someone a little bit more, apprehensive, right, to go to a doctor who's a little bit more out there, right? Especially again, I talk about this all the time, right? If you're not on social media, I don't know what you're doing this time in media and healthcare. If you're not on social media, I have no clue what you're doing right now. You might as well get out the game like right now, right? So, but this may make some patients a little bit more reluctant to go, right? Because imagine if a patient saw me on YouTube and they saw me on the podcast, they heard me on the podcast and they went to my website and they say, this guy does way too much for me, right? He's way too out there for me and I don't want to end up, with my face on some, blog post. And so again, that's something that a case like this is going to add a little discord to, right? But like, I think we'll be able to get past it, right? Like, I think especially once we're able to kind of look at this story as two different stories, right? This is a story of an unfortunate story of a complication that happened during surgery, right? Which again, is, which happens, right? Unfortunately, it happens, right? And it's also a story of physician on social media and what they should be doing from a proper etiquette standpoint, right? So if you're a patient, right? So again, I want to kind of give a little tips before we end this off. If you're a patient who, sees your physician, sees a family physician, internist, OB, whatever the physician is, ask them, ask your physician, how active they are on social media. Ask your physician how if they do any blogs or videos or podcasts. Ask them, because again, it's something that I think should be one of your qualifying questions, right? Hopefully it's a qualifying, like if they do social media, okay, then I can go with them. If they don't do social media, they may be a little high, right? Like that's what I hope for, right? But like, you're okay to ask them, right? And then ask them, is anything you say possibly going to be on social media? And if it is, right, and if you don't want it to be, say, hey, I want my, if I have an interesting case, and I can tell you in medicine, you never want to be an interesting case, right? If I have an interesting case, I don't want to be on social media. I don't want to, and you can say that right out flat, right? Your physician will comply with you, right? Flip side, as a physician, right? I don't want us to look at this case and think like, oh my God, now I'm definitely not going to send that tweet out that I wanted to send. Oh no, I'm definitely not going to write that blog post that I wanted to write. No, I'm definitely not going to do that live stream that I was going to do. I'm definitely not going to record that podcast I was going to record, because that fear that someone may, in a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line, turn around and use it as a reason why, something happened unfortunately happened on the medical side, right? I don't want that to occur, right? Like, that's something like we shouldn't worry about. Like, don't worry about that. I think it's in this day and age, more and more patients are understanding that your physician's going to be active on social media, right? Your physician isn't some hermit who goes to work and then goes home and then that's all they do, right? Like, no, they are much more active. I tell people all the time, if you follow me on Instagram or my Facebook page or my website or my mailing list, you're going to get all the information. You're going to get the podcast. You're going to get the blog. You're going to get all of that. If you follow me on my Twitter, you're going to hear about the Lakers. You're going to hear about my fraternity, Iota Phi Theta Fraternity Incorporated. You're gonna hear about my love for Kobe Bryant. You're gonna hear about a lot more things. Like you're like going for You may see some of my posts, right? Like I'll talk every now and then, but I don't use my Twitter account to, again, reaffirm that I'm a physician and I do all of these medical related things, right? Like I have the links there, right? I'll have posts sent to there. But if you're going to my Twitter account ready to hear the latest health news, right, it's likely not going to be there. And it's just because I've just kind of mentally decided like that's how I'm going to do it. And I think as physicians, right, we have to be ready to take action on something like this, right? Like if you're on social media right now, and you're seeing people post that Dr. Dr. Davis Boots story, and they're saying like, I can't believe this physician's out there. Like you have to be ready to defend that, right? Because if you're not defending that, then no one's going to defend you down the road, right? If you're not defending the fact that yes, you know what, she may have had consent to do those social media. Like if you're not at least saying that, right? Like you're causing more harm than good. Now, and again, this is more a quick caveat before I go. Like I did see some people talk about, and again, this is especially when I love the almost like the Grey's Anatomy type, health folks who like all of a sudden know everything about universal precautions, right? People were talking about like, oh my God, that's not a sterile field and this and that, and I want to kind of break the news to you guys. Unless you're doing like surgery in those like big surgical centers, right? That's universal precaution isn't as severe as you think it is. Like again, if you're doing some procedure in your doctor's office, right? It's not going to be 100% scrubbed down. The instruments they use are going to be clean, right? The tools that they use on you are going to be clean and done up. But again, you may not have the 100% sterile field that you expect to have in a surgery, right? Like again, I wanted to burst that bubble because again, I think a lot of people really think if you have surgery in your doctor's office, right, whether it be some type of biopsy or any type of surgical procedure, right, that is going to be 100% like the OR, and it's just not the case, right? It's unrealistic expectations from the patient side. So just a quick recap. Today we talked about Dr. Wendell Davis Boot. And again, I apologize. Someone shoot me in the comments if I'm saying her last name wrong, right? We talked about how her case of in the most recent media about the malpractice as well as the fact that she dances during ORs are really two separate things. One is, did she have a surgical complication that may have occurred? Okay, that's one issue. And the second is, is she okay to do what she does on social media, right? I am a proponent of yes, right? Like I think she's 100% okay to do what she does on social media because, again, as a physician, you got to be able to brand yourself, right? And as the patient, right, you got to remember and you got to empower yourself, right? You got to empower yourself with that type of knowledge in the forefront, right? Like before, you engage with a physician, right? Before you engage with any type of health professional or any professional in general, right? Ask them, what their presence is on social media, and is there a likelihood that I could be signing away, my rights to be posted or my rights to be talked about, and again, that's something that you need to, make very clear of in the beginning, especially if you don't want that, right? Like if you don't care, right? If you don't care if your doctor writes a blog post, about your condition, obviously not naming you personally, right? But about your condition. In general sense, right? If you don't care that your doctor does a podcast or a vlog, if you don't care about that, then you don't got nothing to worry about. But if you're one of those people who cares about making sure that you don't have any type of footprint online, like have that conversation with your doctor, like today, tomorrow. Again, a lot of you may have already signed consents that says this can happen, right? Again, because a lot of y'all, and I say y'all, like, so I'm sometimes guilty of it, right? Especially those, my Apple users, right? When we're just trying to scroll all the way down to the bottom to say accept, right? A lot of us may have already signed off the consent to say I can be on social media, right? And if you have, ask your doctor if you have to see if you want to change that up, right? So that's the only homework I can give for you this week. I will see you guys next week. You guys have a great and blessed day. Bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Lunch and Learn with Dr. Barry. Please head over to lunchlearnpod.com where you'll get the most recent episodes as well as today's show notes for your listening and viewing pleasure. And like always, depending on where you're listening this to, please subscribe to the podcast so you can get all the latest episodes sent directly to you. And we are at all of your favorite podcast listening stations, including Apple Podcasts, Google Play, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Stitcher Radio. Again, thank you for taking the time to listen and empower yourself to take control of your health, and we'll see you next week.